All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to Overcoming Cross-Functional Team Chaos, 3 lessons learned. It's not going next. Let's go here. I'm Christopher Onias. I've had over 10 years of experience in software testing. I had a couple of years experience in product management, currently leading as a test manager at Liferay, and I've worked with teams all over the globe pretty much. So I have experience on both the technical side and the business side. And one thing that was the same across all of our teams is we're always challenged with trying to improve the way we work together. You go on new teams, you have to figure some people out, and that's not exactly easy. And that's something that is always going to be there and something that's always going to need to improve. So a while back when we were trying to get away from this thing called waterfall, ooh, scary. We tried this thing called Agile, and we're hoping this thing called Agile was supposed to solve all of our problems. Fail fast, fail often, right? That's supposed to be great for software development, for just iterating on a team. But surprise, surprise, Agile was not a silver bullet for us. We had problems like no one on the team knew what the vision was, and because of that, we didn't know how close we were to being finished. We were saying we were constantly at 80%, and our meetings felt pointless. We were always feeling like we were behind schedule because we were blaming it on a thing called scope creep. And the list goes on with all these different problems. Then we heard about this thing called cross-functional teams, and we were hyped because all the problems that we were facing were supposed to be addressed with this cool thing called cross-functional teams. It's supposed to be easier to communicate the vision because all these different units, these different disciplines are on the same team. And because of that, you have improved communication between these different silos. It's supposed to be faster and more efficient at solving problems. And teams will start learning from each other. So you can have your QA to start thinking like your devs thinking like your QA. You can get your entire team thinking like the product manager. You can get, and here's the other side, you can get demand gen thinking like sales, or your sales team thinking like demand gen. So you have that full story across your team. And this is supposed to help our teams get stuff done better and faster. Whoa. So we were thrown back. Okay, so cross-functional teams also wasn't a silver bullet for us. And no one still knew what the vision was. Communication problems were still there. Bottlenecks still continue to happen, conflicts, etc. The same problems were still there. So, Okay, so it was a problem at first. We started to turn things around. And one of the things that we stopped doing is we stopped throwing our teams in these shells, these things that we call like Agile, Scrum, cross-functional teams. And what we learned was we had to iterate on the process and the teams just as much as we iterate on the product. So the way we're trying to push things forward, we got to push our team the same way. We got to a point where we're starting to complete 30% more in sprints. Fewer and fewer items were being pushed back in the workflow, so we're getting things right. And most importantly, the vision was clear. Now, sounds easier said than done. So you're asking how? Well, that's why we're here, right? And that's why I really wanted to do this talk, because it's not exactly easy. Now here's something that completely changed my mind, and it sounds really simple. Nothing is a waste of time if you use experience wisely. It's like, well, eat your vegetables, exercise 30 minutes a day, right? Easy. So for me, there are all these problems that were happening on my team, and I was complaining about all these different problems. I was complaining about all the wasted time, and I wasn't doing anything about it. I became complacent. And for some reason, it wasn't until I saw something like this that said, hey, if you're complaining, you're not using any of that time. So I used this time to reflect. And I realized the thing that I needed to do is continuously improve my team just as much as we continuously improve the product. So today I want to share some lessons that I learned to start benefiting from cross-functional teams. All right, so here it is. 3 things. 1, look at your team. 2, look at your goals. And 3, look at your obstacles. Okay, that's all I have today, guys. Please rate my session, download it. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so 1, look at your team. So coming from engineering, I love frameworks because it just makes really complex things a lot simpler. So what I did is I tried scaling this pyramid with my team. At the bottom, we have roles and responsibilities. This is where a lot of teams start. You start to know the players on your team. I know I got this dev, I got this guy from sales, I'm working with support, I have a QA guy, oh, I also have a designer. Or maybe you have these 3 guys and they wear multiple hats and you know, okay, yeah, they're taking care of these 3 things, cool. And we kind of define them based on like how the industry works. But what's important here is you gotta know the people who are filling those roles and how they're filling it, how they're not filling it, what are their strengths and weaknesses. And that goes into the second one, dependability. This one is the most important slice of this pyramid, I think, and also the trickiest, because this one is where you start to develop a thing called psychological safety. And I can get into that in a little bit here. That's really important because that's what's gonna help your team open up. And it's gonna help your team feel like that they can take risks. And the last one is process parallelism. This is where your team's processes start to intersect. You'll have more touch bases. You'll have more points where they work together. More of those organic meetings where you have someone like QA working with design, or you have your devs working with sales or something like that. And that's really important. And that's when your team truly becomes cross-functional. Okay. So starting off with roles and responsibilities. This is just as important as knowing the players on your team. So you know the sport, you know what you need, but you gotta know the players. You gotta know how each person is filling those roles. Conflict can result from not getting this down right because one person can have an expectation on someone else, and then they might not be fulfilling that because they're putting more stresses in other areas that they see that is more important. So one way that is great to get this started is if you haven't had this meeting already where you talk about your roles and responsibilities, like have each person define their roles and their responsibilities, their processes, and just make a round. Or anytime you add someone new to the team, this is very important because this allows someone to tell you how they're defining their role. And they could have different focuses. And I saw these differences because there were differences in where QA was operating with one industry standard here in the US. And then you go over to Germany, it's completely different. And then you go over to Spain and it's different again. You're just like, okay, everybody's on different pages. So the point here is to get everybody on the same page so that you have the context to communicate to each other. Now, if you don't really have that context, and the things that they say during daily stand-ups kind of feel pointless. You don't really know where they are in their process chain. And this is the first step. This is where for teams like usually hover around. They'll know their team, they'll know who's on there, but the processes are kind of fuzzy. And the next 2 parts are where things start to connect a little bit better. So once you know the roles and responsibilities, you start to go into this thing that I call dependability. Now, this one is tricky because this works really well if you have a strong leader on the team. And at Liferay, the root of our company values revolves around investing in others to help people reach their full potential. So it's a little bit different in that the person leading the team, the person above the team, is actually there to support the team from underneath. So some of the things that are very important as a leader, and it seems really weird because they're not actually like there to like for these particular skills, they're not particularly pushing the product, but they're there to like coach the team. And this is a thing called psychological safety. Now, if you don't know what that is it's kind of like that feeling where you feel comfortable enough to stick your neck out, take some risks, and you don't feel like you're threatened. You don't feel like you'll be You're not afraid of being humiliated. You feel safe. And that safety is important because then that's what's going to allow that person on a team or your team to reach out to other teams, reach out to other team members, and take risks. But how do you do that? One good way to do it is to have your leader on a team recognize other people's strengths. It'll encourage them because they know that somebody else knows that they're strong in something. And as a leader, being transparent to your own weaknesses and reaching out to other people on the team for help helps make that relationship a little bit more real. It's like, oh, this guy's he actually needs my help. It's not just he's barking down these orders and I need to meet this deadline. And things like these is what's going to set the tone for their team. Other members of the team are going to start to follow in this pattern, encourage others to reach out to other people when they see that they can use help. And once they get past this, then they don't feel threatened that they could take risks. And once they do that, they can start actually working with each other. And that weaves into process parallelism. Now what this is if you have multiple people on a team, they have multiple processes. Usually on a new team, the handoffs are really late in the game. It's like when I'm finished with this one thing, then I throw it over or chuck it over the fence and it goes over to QA, or it goes over to the product manager and they approve it or something like that. Now what this is where your team actually starts to have touch points in between. And that's important because that's where your team actually starts to become cross-functional. Because they're not chucking stuff over anymore. They're actually working with each other to enhance the stuff that they're working on. And what this little squiggly line thing I try to draw here is that when you're working on dependability and trying to integrate more process parallelism in your team, it's going to help improve your ability to work together. You're going to start to understand more of the team's strengths and weaknesses. And that's going to help you to work with each other. And that's just going to keep going back and forth. For one of the teams that I was on at Liferay, our teams noticed a bottleneck at UX design. So what we did is we threw more people at the team. Now, if you guys are familiar with Brooks' Law, you guys know Brooks' Law? So Brooks' Law, this guy named Fred Brooks said certain things are not divisible. And he has an example that a woman can create a baby in 9 months, but it's impossible for 9 women to create one baby in 1 month. So it's a kind of fallacy that describes that you can't just throw people at the problem and expect to solve it. There's training. There's learning about the team. All the stuff down there that they have to do, they still have to do that. And they still have to know the product and the team. So it's going to take time for them to kind of get integrated fully. For us, because we threw all these people in it, the problems were still there. So hearing out the problems, what ended up happening was the application that we were working on was really wide and complex. So when they're working on some UX, it was hard for them to really go through the entire application to know whether or not there's any like relational problems between other experiences, there's any inconsistencies, and they didn't know whether or not it would work out. So being in QA at that time, this is something that we deal with all the time. We try to make sure that we spot consistencies so we don't duplicate our code. What we did is I said, hey, let's just start meeting. Like, this is something that I can help you with. And you know what? Having this early exposure to these designs will help me get a head start on writing my tests. So I'm eliminating a bottleneck for me, and I'm using my skills in QA to help them. At first, it started using up more time than it was before, but at least we're getting it right. Eventually, from all that work together, they started to pick up some of the techniques that we had in detecting inconsistencies and also scanning the application. And our meetings started to become fewer and fewer. We got to the point where instead of meeting daily or bi-weekly, we started meeting anytime there's any sort of great change in the application. And that's great because now we were better than before. And this is a good example of process parallelism at work. All right, number 2, look at your goals. So one of the things that we stress, one of the things that we measure, especially as a cross-functional team working in Agile Scrum, is we measure time. You can say, yeah, story points is not time, it's complexity. But at the end of the day, we're calculating time. And that's a problem because this assumes that the tasks that we're working on are the right tasks. And what I mean by right is that, is it really the most valuable thing to work on? Is it giving the most value toward the project? We don't really know. And we started measuring this. So focus on the value of the project. Cost comes second. Because if you're not delivering on the value, you're not doing the thing that you were set out to do. So here's a way where you can kind of get that feedback loop that you need in order to help your team verify or measure that the things that you're working on are the most valuable things. And it was hard for me to kind of grasp how to work with this across the team. So I have this little improvement model for you guys. It's kind of a spin on the story ticket design, but with some added flavor from the scientific method. So if we do this thing for these people, so it's like as a bleh, I would like bleh, we'll achieve this outcome so that I can bleh. But one thing that we miss is this last part. We'll know we're successful when this happens. And this is a part of the scientific method where you're verifying the things that you're trying. And that's a thing that we didn't do. Like, how do you know we're delivering on that value? How do we know we are providing a better customer experience? How do we know that we're making the application less buggier, faster? We need to start measuring that. Because what will happen out of this is when we're measuring, we're gonna check those measurements. We're gonna talk about how well or not well we're meeting the goals that we had. And that's important. So having this can help your team kind of like kickstart that process. And as you do this more and more often, it's gonna get easier. It starts off really difficult, but with practice, it's not that bad. Let's see. Okay. As you're measuring, don't only measure just the value and pushing the product forward. Something that's important is, well, when you're working on something day in, day out, I mean, the thing that you really need to know is, am I making the impact toward the company? Does the stuff that I do have value? Am I putting it in the right place? So celebrating success, showing people that their work is adding up to the greater goal that we have, and that we're hitting the goals, the values that we agreed upon as a team, it's encouraging, and they need this motivation. But don't just look at the last 2 sprints. So if you know the Agile Scrum workflow, there's like a, what is it called? Like a sprint review portion where you review, okay, what did we get done? Does it link back to our goals? But also look at the last quarter, the last year. And don't fixate it on the product. Have metrics or have discussions around what are the processes that we changed? What are the things that actually have been making things easier for us? Some of those are soft measurements. Like, oh yeah, it's actually, I have an easier time approaching this person. Or yeah, we actually ended up with 1/3 of our meetings than we started at the beginning of this quarter. And that's, those are things that are very encouraging as a team because it feels like you're getting somewhere. For us, on our teams, like when I didn't have any of these moments where we celebrate success, it felt kind of a drain. It just felt like a year has passed and just like, okay, I guess I'll work on sprint 78. Yeah, this one is like, oh, okay, let's look at sprint 26. Oh, dang, we only completed 20 tasks out of instead of like the 70 that we are now. That's pretty crazy. All right, so 3, look at your obstacles. Now, when there's a bunch of problems, especially problems outside of your context, it's easy to become complacent. because it's like, oh, that's out of my hands. Or when you have a big problem, it's really hard to kind of try to tackle it on your own because it's huge. Problems should be addressed as a team. On your team, it's cross-functional, and especially after scaling that pyramid, you'll notice that all these different people, all these different disciplines will help you break down those obstacles into smaller ones. So if you have one big problem, breaking it down into all of its parts. What are some ways that we can improve it? And what are the obstacles of those? Here, then you can start to figure out from all those small things, which one will give us the most return on investment. And it's easiest done as a team. And when you start to do these things as a team, you start from solving really simple problems to more and more complex problems. And that's really important because that's essentially what you need to be doing every day. Like, there's an obstacle, how can I improve? Or there's this new obstacle, how do we prevent this from happening? Another obstacle that's very common, especially for us, is that we need to make decisions quickly, because sometimes a decision is waiting on some higher up, a stakeholder. And one thing that we tried out that was pretty successful on our team was that we made an agreement. We said, okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to give you guys as much scope, teach you guys as much as I can about the product. And if I'm not around to give you guys an answer fast enough, I'm gonna trust you guys to make the call. And in order to make sure we're okay, we should always leave time to iterate. So the more unknowns there are, leave more time to iterate. And on top of that, try to recognize the areas that cannot be answered by the team and fill in those uncertainties as the leader or as a product owner, as someone who knows more, like in the subject matter expert on the team. If you can't teach the entire team, another thing that works really well is having a proxy decision maker. That one person that can help the team make decisions. And that's great for teams that have multiple hats, that have to be in multiple projects, because sometimes there's a fire somewhere else and they can't answer for the team. So how do you keep your team productive? You can't just leave those like 4 or 5 high-paid guys just waiting around doing other things. That thing that they're waiting on could be the most important thing. So this can waste time and money. And because of this, we actually had a lot of success because sometimes they would implement this one thing in a different way that I thought. And it ends up being way better and cleaner than I initially had designed it. And I think that's great. That's exactly what you want from your cross-functional team. Okay, stay focused, but keep improving. For us, retrospectives would only come once a year. And that was really hard. And we had to do that because we had team members from all over the world, people from Spain, Brazil. We have some people from Croatia. We have some people from Hungary. And we can't just pay everybody to come to our headquarters so we can have a retrospective. Those time zones are rough too, because there's always one country that's missing out, that the people who should be asleep. And when we had these big retrospectives, we had a ton of goals, a ton of initiatives, and just a ton of things to consider throughout the year. So we set them out, we had these goals, but then throughout the year, things change. Scope changes, our focus changes, our values evolve. And when that happens and we pivot, we kind of like lose track of what the original plan was. So what do you do here? This is something that is really, really important in anchoring your cross-functional teams together, is the vision. So a way to keep the vision clear is to simply just repeat it. Keep it a part of the discussion. So anytime there's a pivot, revisit your goals, revisit your values, revisit the things that you wanted to do at the beginning of the year to see if it's evolving or not. Cross-check it. Just like the feedback loop from before with the scientific method, you should be doing it here too, because this will give the team the opportunity to reinforce the vision, because they might have a different idea of what it is, and just by repeating it under a different context, they're going to absorb a different view from it, a different dimension than they did before. And it also gives them an opportunity to reconcile or bring up any discrepancies. Like, hey, we were focusing on this component before because we were trying to deliver this value to our customers. But what we're doing now is completely different. I don't understand. Could you explain how that's different? Maybe it's not different. And by you bringing it up, it also gets the rest of the team thinking. Oops, I should put this. And when things are brought up by the team, don't be afraid to think about it. It brings in fresh ideas, because simply, if things don't change, or if you don't bring in any fresh ideas, you can't really improve. Things are just going to stay the same. They'll stay stagnant. And even the vision, just like the task we work on, needs to be looked at. Okay, so let's roll back those three things. Look at your team. So look at the people, treat the people on your team like people. Know the people who are filling those roles, and don't run into each other. Build psychological safety. Look at your goals. Put value as a focal point and measure the right things. Look at your obstacles and bust through them as a team. Decision bottlenecks are also obstacles, and repeat and review the vision to keep them fresh in the team's mind. That way it can anchor your entire cross-functional team. That should be the thing that is similar across your team. Okay, for real this time? Thank you for coming to my talk, Overcoming Cross-Functional Team Chaos. We still have a little bit of time for Q&A. If you don't have any questions, please rate my session. Let me know how I did. Did you like my talk? Did you not like my talk? Did you not like the subject? Let me know, because I want to come back next year. Last time I did a technical talk, this time is not so technical. I want to know how best to serve you guys. So do we have any questions? Hey.
So really enjoyed it. Do you have a concrete example, without naming names, of instances where the teams just were not getting along with the strong personalities, they want to hear versus going to open?
Yeah. Yeah. So the question was, do I have any concrete examples where, I'm doing this because of recording. Do I have any concrete examples of where the team were at odds? The very common thing where the team is at odds, especially early on at Liferay, was probably, we were at odds with project management. Because we had these expectations as engineers, as QA, like, oh, they're supposed to help us drive the timeline. They're supposed to help us communicate across countries, across silos. And the way that we address that is we try to verify, okay, we have this person who we understand as a project manager. They're supposed to do these things, but are they really supposed to? Like, what are their tasks? When we made it real, we asked the guy, hey, so these are the expectations that we had. We expect these. We expect the timeline. We expect you to be there for every meeting. You're not there for every meeting, and it's hard for us because we are relying on you, and we need your help. So I know you're busy. So what are you working on? So we try to make it real. What is the guy doing? We realized this guy was the only project manager across 3 huge products. How does that work? So instead of pointing our fingers at him saying like, hey, you suck for not doing all these things for us, we said, okay, can you teach us some techniques? Like, what can we do ourselves to help project manage ourselves? He showed us the Agile Manifesto, like processes are less than communication, all that good stuff. And he pointed at material that can help us actually become project managers. Just like I was saying before, try to learn for your team when you have certain weaknesses. One of the things I mentioned before was like, turn your team into product managers so that they can help make decisions, educated decisions about the product when you're not around. This was a way that was helpful for us. Is that concrete enough? Okay, cool. You had a question.
This is really, really great.
Oh, thank you.
In that sentence that you just said, in terms of supposed to, I think you said it like 4 times, which was an assumption.
Yes.
Which was a clear assumption. But I found they brought me in to Genmark to be that person that is not with IT, not with marketing, not with HR, to be impartial, which is really great to really connect and orchestrate and navigate.
Mm-hmm.
What's really great about it, when I first did, for every meeting, I did have side conversations with everyone before we put all of them together.
Perfect.
The other thing that I did was define in the conversation, this is what I think the role is going to be, responsibility. Do you agree with it? Now,
Yeah.
let's have a conversation about that. Now we can all see what the roles and responsibilities are, the name that goes to it. If you're not in agreement with it, then here's an opportunity to say, okay, that doesn't work for me. What does work for you? And everything you've said, it's a conversation.
Yeah.
And in that space, like you said, create a safe space.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing to fear here. Nobody's out to make anybody look bad. We're all looking to do the overall vision.
Yeah.
All looking to get to the same goal, maybe different how to get there. But the great thing about it is we want to get there.
Yeah.
And actually articulate that. And to your point, constantly keep acknowledging people for what they're contributing. You're here to contribute. If you're not here to contribute, you wouldn't be here.
Right. Yeah, exactly. We wouldn't have you on the team if we needed you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
No, thank you. You should do that this talk next time. All right. Anybody else? All right. Well, if you guys want to shoot me an email anytime, feel free to scan my badge, my contacts there and everything. I think it's bound to the right email this time. Otherwise, thank you for coming. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.